Okay, all right, so welcome everybody to the Rise Challenge Illinois webinar. This is just kind of a really quick overview to make it really easy and understandable so that you can just jump right in and get started. So Rise Challenge Illinois is a brand new program for the Environmental Education Association of Illinois. It was launched just this year in partnership with quite a few other organizations. And we're really excited about bringing this program to Illinois, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that is in just a minute. So what is Rise Challenge Illinois? A little bit of background. This is a program that brings together student voice, civic engagement, natural hazards, natural disasters, and project-based learning all into one student-led challenge. So it's a little bit of teacher professional development, it's a little bit of project-based learning, it's a little bit of natural disaster education, and it's a little bit student competition. And FEMA, our major funding partner, has incredible resources and support behind this program that enables us to do all of those things and a lot more with their backing and their support. As I said, it's a multi-organization initiative. So you've got the Environmental Education Association of Illinois is kind of the boots on the ground, right? We're the ones, your direct kind of partner in this, organizing it and recruiting educators and pairing educators with experts and helping you with your projects. Then we have Earth Force, which is kind of the other piece of the program side of Rise Challenge Illinois. They're the experts in all things project-based learning. So they have this incredible 6-step process that really walks educators through how to get students thinking about environmental issues in their community, how to investigate those issues, how to speak to and address stakeholders on those issues, and then how to really develop a plan for what to do, what can we do, and then putting that plan into action to try and solve those issues. I'm going to jump ahead really quick because I want to show this graphic can kind of help to break down all of these different organizations. So as I said, we've got on the programming side, you've got the Environmental Education Association of Illinois, and you've got Earth Force. And then on the funding and support side, we have FEMA, like I said, is our major funding partner, our big backer. It's the Region 5 office. They're the folks that we're working with. So they are centrally located right here in Illinois. They've got a lot of great contacts around the state and really know, the situation of what we're working with here in Illinois. And then also on the funding and support side, we have the Association of Floodplain Managers Foundation, and that's a national organization of floodplain managers, and they're the ones providing support for the prize money. So we'll talk a little bit about the summit. Students get to apply and participate in kind of a capstone activity at the end of this. That's the Rise Challenge Summit. And there is actually prize money that can go back to their classroom, their school, or their organization that they're working with on the challenge if they happen to win or place in the summit. So it's super exciting that there's actually funding and money involved in winning the summit for those students. It makes it very real. So kind of when you break down the program implementation, this is that 6-step Earth Force process I talked about, the educator prep, the PD, and the launch. Some of you were able to attend the Earth Force workshop that we held this past fall. We'll be doing that hopefully on an annual or more regular basis. We haven't been able to have one this winter, and we probably won't get to having one this coming spring. It'll probably be closer to the summer months before we get to have another Earth Force workshop, but we are developing, and I think we have one Earth Force facilitator in the room, two, maybe Megan and Kathleen actually, are both in the room. So we are developing a network of Earth Force facilitators around the state that will be able to offer those trainings on a more regular basis. The steps, step 1 through 3 with your students is really where you're researching the issue that you want to talk about or the problem that might be happening. Step 4 is putting together your proposal, which we'll talk about how simple and fun that can be in just a little bit. And then 5 and 6 is the summit, and then your project implementation, which we'll talk about too. Okay. So just wanted to again jump back. The mission of the Rise Challenge Illinois is to create a generation with the knowledge, skills, and motivation to improve community resilience to natural disasters. The unique thing about this program is that it is targeting this idea of natural hazards. So in Illinois, obviously, our biggest natural hazard that almost all of our communities face is flooding. We also have some very severe storms here in central Illinois. Just a few years ago, Washington, Illinois was decimated by awful tornadoes. And so really having students think through about, you know, what can we do to prepare for that, what can we do to lessen the impact of that, is something that is sometimes missed in education, right? It's not something that usually gets talked about in formal classrooms, but there's definitely a need for our communities and our students to really understand these things that have the possibility of happening more and more as our climate continues to change. All right, so the RISE Challenge timeline, just to jump right into it, anytime throughout the year you can sign up for the program with the RISE interest form. I know several of you have already done that, and we're going to throw the link to that in the chat box if you haven't had an opportunity to fill that out. It's a really simple form. It just lets us know that you're interested in the program, you wanted to be added to our email list, you know, have regular communication with us, and there's all kinds of different ways that you can be involved. So even if you don't think you are able to commit fully to leading a team and really being a part of the challenge this year, you might want to attend the summit, maybe offer your services as a judge to you know, judge the projects that get submitted or the proposals that get submitted and volunteer in that way, just to get an idea of what the challenge is all about. There's also a way for organizations to support the educators that are doing projects. So you might potentially be an expert in natural hazards in your area, or flooding or water conservation, and you might be able to offer those expertise to a classroom teacher. So that interest form is going to be all of those different ways that you might want to get involved in the project. January to February, so just around the corner. I can't believe it's already the holidays upon us, and we'll be in January before we know it. This is when you're going to assemble a team and want to get started, really diving into that issue investigation, looking at your community, having the students really think about the natural hazards that might be impacting their community, and in ways that they can get involved in those areas. March 5th, 2021 is our summer proposal deadline. So that's when you would want to make sure that your team gets their proposal turned into me. It's just, we'll go over what the proposal looks like, but it's just going to be an email to me with the proposal as an attachment. Then in mid-March, our judges will have judged all those proposals, and proposals that are accepted to present at the summit will be announced. So we'll get back to everyone that submitted a proposal and let them all know who will be attending or able to present at the summit. March to April, this is when project implementation can begin. If you want your students to start putting together their project before the summit, that's totally an option. Again, because of the incredible funding support that we have from FEMA, we have the funds to pay for all of your project supplies and assist with that project implementation with funding for any proposals that are accepted to present at the summit. So once you know that you've made it past that first round of judging, then you have access to a great deal amount of funds to be able to implement your project. Obviously,
actually, I do believe that any proposal that's submitted, even though it is not, even if you don't make it to the summit, you are eligible for implementation funds. So
okay.
Even better, all submitted proposals can ask for implementation funding. Anybody who goes to the summit then will be also eligible for prize money. So I do believe any proposal submitted can apply for implementation funds.
That is good to know, good to hear. Yeah, so again, there's a great deal amount of support here to really make these projects come to life and happen for your students. And the reason that that's so important, not only to FEMA and Earth Force, but also to EEAI, is because we really know the value of students not only investigating and researching these issues, but then actually seeing their plan come to fruition. Being able to actually do the project that they designed and they spent all that time researching is really valuable. It's a really amazing, valuable experience for those students. So we want to make sure that that can happen for as many groups as possible. Now, if implementing the project prior to the summit is not going to work for whatever your project might be, you need to wait until later in the spring, that's also possible. You can delay that implementation until after the summer. We just ask that projects be completed kind of by the end of that school year timeline. And then April 28th, 2021 is going to be the Rise Challenge Illinois Summit. So this is when those teams will come together. Obviously this year it will be a virtual event, and they'll present their projects. Again, they'll put together, you know, a presentation. We're going to have a group of judges, and the summit will be open to any, you know, audience that might want to join to watch those presentations. And then the winning teams will be announced shortly after the summit concludes. Alyssa, any questions coming in so far? I haven't been able to monitor the chat box. That's hard to do when you're
All good.
Screen. Perfect.
Yeah, feel free to throw your this is a small group too. If you have questions along the way, like I think if you just want to come off mute or throw it in the chat box, I'm sure we understand. Then we will have a little bit of time after this kind of formal overview to dig into some question and answer and get into some details.
Yes, absolutely. So the summit proposal, some of the other groups that are doing Rise Challenges have a very, you know, there's a formula, it's a written proposal. I'm really open to creativity. I love letting students get wild and crazy when they're putting together a presentation or a proposal of this kind. So there's definitely certain things that have to be in there. And there's a whole proposal guideline on our website that I can show you that describes all of those different pieces. But if they want to turn it into, you know, an oral presentation, a play, artwork, a written proposal, a song, I mean, however your students envision communicating that information, I am completely open to all of those ideas. There's a student checklist that makes it really easy for the students to go back and make sure that all of those pieces are included. And we also make the judging rubrics available to the educators as well. So you can see exactly what the judges are looking for in that proposal to make sure that the students have really completed each one of those or included each one of those pieces. And again, the proposal deadline is March 5th, 2021, and it's just attaching whatever the proposal is in an email to me, letting me know you're turning it in on behalf of your team. So the summit specifics this year, again, it's going to be a virtual summit, which makes it super easy to have it be a statewide initiative and a statewide program to really include as many groups as possible. The date is April 28th. We're shooting for kind of a late afternoon, early evening time frame to make it really easy for educators to get their group together potentially after school, obviously in virtual settings for a lot of us. It'll probably be on a platform just like this on Zoom, and all are welcome. So your team can invite their community, any project partners or stakeholders they may have worked with, other educators in your building or in your organization, administrators, and even the students' parents might want to come and watch them present. We will have judges from a wide range of different backgrounds, organizations, and industries that deal with water conservation, flooding, natural hazards, FEMA, all of those different realms will be represented as judges and volunteers for the summit. So it's going to be a really pretty impressive crowd that the students will be presenting to. We will have a keynote presentation from FEMA, and then the students will just jump right in with their presentations. Once a proposal has been accepted, again, that's when project implementation can begin with funding support from EEAI. We can't give you the money outright, so there's some logistics that have to happen with, it's just us kind of buying all the supplies and things, or paying for a contractor if it's building something on your campus, things like that, but we can work out all of those details. And then again, each proposal that's been accepted to the summit will present at the summit, and there is a judging rubric for those presentations that's available as well. So how can you get started today? The first thing to do, again, is to fill out that RISE interest form. Let us know that you're interested. And the second thing to do is get a group of students, which might actually be the toughest thing to do right now because gathering in a group is not allowed. But
you can do it virtually.
Yes, you can do these projects virtually. You can assign all kinds of self-investigation, having the students answer questions and kind of examine things on their own time, and then gathering in virtual settings to discuss and make plans, answer questions, and things like that. There are definitely a lot of tools and guidance from EarthForce on how to lead this in virtual settings if you are in a virtual setting. Although I do know that there are a lot of nature centers, schools, and other organizations that are meeting in really small groups in outdoor settings, fully masked. So there might be a safe way to do it in person as well. But I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa, who's going to jump in to the next part about how to start that issue investigation phase. Like, where do we begin? How can we make this as easy as possible to just jump right in?
Yeah, so Megan has a great question in the chat that says, can you share how educators are doing this virtually? The first thing I will let you know, and I will go searching for, is that we did, like 2 weeks ago, we did a RISE Challenge roundtable with educators that have done this before in Colorado. This is the first year that it's launched in other states. And so those folks that have been through it kind of gave a rundown of their experience and answered some questions. So I will make sure to share that. But getting started, so how are folks doing this now? So basically, a lot of the educators that are beginning this at this moment are working with either informal groups like environmental clubs and such that they're working with in virtual settings, or with their classrooms. And to get started, I guess, with those folks is as basic as asking, as I'm going to ask you all, how do we learn about natural hazards in our community? Or if you were starting this with students, where would you begin? And so we got some questions that came from our friends at FEMA to just kind of get us thinking about what kind of questions you would start to ask. And Abby's going to open these now. But I think just like so what's happening right now is a lot of educators are presenting questions to their students about, hey, what are the natural hazards in our community? What are the challenges that our community has? And so, for example, in Montana, and Abby, I don't see anything on the screen. I don't know what happened there. And we can just, if you want to just like cut and paste a couple into the chat, that's fine too, just to get us thinking. But oh, look at this, cool, look at your flyer, you're so good. So what are some, and if everyone wants to like come off mute or put in the chat or something, if you just have questions or answers to this. So which members of our community are more at risk for natural hazard issues? What are some disasters that can occur in our community? Let's just start there. So what are some disasters that can occur in our community? So how, if you were starting this with students, what might you all do? How would you get students to answer this question? What are some ideas?
We're going to start a weather unit when we come back from break. So we're going to talk about weather, and then we're going to track the weather, and then that will lead into the end of our weather unit. We'll start talking about disasters and what goes on in our communities, and then kind of pulling in the RISE challenge at that point.
That is really cool. So how are they going to learn when you get to the point of disasters? Do you have ideas on ways that they're going to learn about local disasters and local natural hazards?
I haven't gotten that far yet, but you know, tornadoes is our big thing. Now we're getting lots of rain. So we see that. I mean, our school is right in the middle of a field. I mean, we have nothing around us. So if a tornado came through, we'd be an easy target.
Right.
But I think
so you're obviously like thinking a lot about this. I know you haven't like gotten there yet, but like what would be one example of some way that you might encourage them to figure, like to learn about that themselves?
Well, it's a pretty difficult class that I'm working with. So that presents some challenges of its own. I mean, I would probably present them with some questions to research because I don't think they're probably going to come up with some things on their own. You know, we could have some speakers, you know, virtual speakers, talk to the kids. Because we've got some, I know I live in Douglas County, and, you know, we have pretty active first responders that like to get out in the community and talk to people. So I think that would be good for the kids. And, you know, maybe they could present some things the kids didn't even think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that idea of reaching out. Abby, can you stop sharing your screen now? I'm just going to play with this question for now. There's a lot of resources, but So what are some natural hazards in our community? So asking students, like, how would you figure this out? And who would you talk to? Where do you find this information? So for example, in the Montana class I was talking about, those students are on tribal lands, and so they're talking to tribal leaders about their experiences with natural hazards. So one thing is they could potentially ask community leaders, family members, and do like a little interview to collect that information. They could review media, what's happened in your community when you search flooding in your community or whatever, like seeing some stories about what's happened. It could be, like you said, who might we want to talk to get more information on this? So a local floodplain manager or emergency manager or the fire department, or, you know, like have them brainstorm a list of folks that they might reach out to with some initial questions about what are the big issues that we face in our community. So those would be great ways to get going. Does anyone else have other ideas of like ways that you could ask students this question of what are some natural hazards in our community and get them like collecting information and data on that? Ideas?
How about brainstorming in groups and then asking family and friends if they have any firsthand experiences?
Yes, I love that, because that makes it really real for students too. And that's one of the things I love about this challenge, is that it's really locally based, right? And so when students are addressing issues in their local community, it's much more meaningful. If we're talking about flooding in general, it's not something I may be able to connect with, but I know when I walk down the path by my house and I see the high flood signs and I look back at media about what happened in this area and I talk to people who have been through it, I know and I can feel and see like what happens to my community during flooding. And so that's where it's like really pulling in the local context. So yes, that's a great, even just asking, brainstorming and asking family and friends for their experiences is a really great place to start, just to get to thinking about what have you all experienced in our community? You know, what have been some of those hazards? Yeah, definitely. So in my community, fire and flooding are two really big ones. And I can guarantee you, in a class, if you reach out to loved ones, if you have 30 kids in a class and each of them reach out to a couple of people to see what their experience is, there's definitely going to be people in that group that have been touched by flooding and fire. So how about other ideas of like, how would you get folks started on this idea, or like young people engaged in this question? Any other thoughts? I'm going to share something else with y'all. Throw in your ideas if you have them, or put them in the chat if you don't want to come off. If you're not in a place to come off of. Okay. So there are also tools that we can use. One of them, there's a couple different ones. So, ooh, that didn't work. Oh yeah, let me see if this works. Oh geez, what happened? Okay, try that. So I just put something in the chat. There's a bunch of tools, and Abby will show us in a little bit here. There's a whole resource page on EEAI, and maybe we can put that in the chat, Abby, and she can show us in a minute, but it's all kinds of resources for Rise Challenge. And we will continue to update that with things like with these cool tools. But this is an ARC, a GIS, I don't know how to say it. It's in like an Esri thing. But basically you can find your community. And so you can kind of like zoom in and find your community, and you can look at the natural hazards in your area. So it's really interesting because I like opened it and it was like volcano risk, none. And I was like, oh, like, of course there's not, but I also wouldn't have thought of that as a natural hazard risk. And it was like, oh, of course, if you're in certain parts of the world, that is very much a natural hazard risk. So this is one tool. And you can dig into that as you would like. I have another that's a little bit easier to use. You can just type in from the beginning. This is called Flood Factor. So that's also in the chat now. With this flood factor, you can type in your address or an address and see the kind of risk of your area. It's very particular, but you can get more information. So if everyone does that really quickly, I'd just be curious if anybody is in their current state. Like, are you in flood risk areas? Or I think there's like a number. Everyone's shaking their head? Yeah? Yeah. Wow. What does it say, Megan?
It has Boone County marked as high flood hazard.
Interesting. Okay. And then I think you can dig into that a little bit more through there and zoom in on different places, if I remember right. So anybody else have did you guys get to that, the flood factor? Were you able to check it out? I think it would be a fun thing to do with students.
I noticed all the states are different colors. How do you know what they mean?
So you're still in the first one?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So if you zoom in, which
mine is blue, darker blue.
Yep. So if you click on your community, though, I think it will bring up the county, and then it will tell you, like, so I just accidentally opened Grand County in Colorado, and it says, like, actually, well, that's weird. Wildfire hazard low. That's surprising. Snowfall hazard high, landslide hazard high. So what does yours say, Pam?
We have medium tornado hazard, medium snowfall, and medium heat wave. No avalanche hazard. That's good because there is no elevation where we are, which is kind of funny. And even flood hazard is low. So anyway, we're not high for anything.
Okay. So if you check out, okay, Tiffany's got a medium earthquake but low flooding. Interesting. That's really okay. And see, like, earthquake is another one I wouldn't have really thought of. But so you can see that there are tools, right, that we can at least get those questions going with students and get them thinking about what are the issues. I love, though, the idea of having both qualitative and quantitative data collection. So that's in Earth Force, we call it our inventories. And in collecting that information, we like to see numbers and qualitative sort of ideas. So that's where the, like, getting stories and ideas and surveys and questionnaire, whatever, from people, in addition to having the, like, numbers of the flood risk percentage and all of those things kind of come into play together. But this is a great example of how you could get started with students. I think you all have come up with good ideas so far. You could use one of these tools and then have students brainstorm on a Jamboard if you're virtual, or you could, oh, Kathleen, did you want to say something, Kathleen, or were you swatting about the way?
There was a bug.
Okay. It's like this was either like, hey, I have something really important to say, or there's a bug. So yeah, so that's the very basis of getting started. And really in RISE, what we want you to do is engage students in discovering these local natural hazards, and then have them decide on which ones they want to focus on and learn about them. And then once they learn about them, decide on how they want to, like, how do they want to address those issues. And so that's really what the proposal is it's like, hey, we saw there's flooding in our area. We see that this group is affected, or this building is affected, or people don't know about these things, whatever the issue is that they find related to flooding or the natural hazard in their community. And then they research it and they figure out as much as they can about it. And then they fill out a proposal that says, this is how we want to make change. And they're asking for a change to happen. And it's really as simple as that. What Earth Force would love for everyone to do, and the reason why Earth Force kind of backs this and has all of our resources available, is we would love for you all to use our decision-making tools and our different, like, democratic decision-making, our strategy grids, and some of the resources we have at earthforceresources.org, which I'm going to share because it's open right here, that gives our process by step and all of the different resources we have All of them are available, none of them are mandatory, but we would hope, the overall idea is that it's not educators going in and saying, hey, this is what we're learning about and this is what we're going to do about it. It's us as educators going in and saying, what is interesting to you as a young person? What are you interested in? And then how do you want to learn about this? Do you want to talk to stakeholders, and how would you do that? Who do you want to talk to? How are you going to research these things? How are you going to share it with your friends and with your classmates? And then saying, how do we want to address this issue? But it's really the core of this is that it's student-led, right? That's what we are really hoping for. And so the Earth Force resources, hopefully there's stuff in there that will help you do that. But the idea is just that we are engaging young people in learning about these hazards in their local communities, learning about those issues, and then the proposal is how they want to address them. And then hopefully the summit and hopefully there's implementation of their project, and there's the summit to share their ideas and celebrate, which is like the final step of Earth Force, is just that, sharing and celebrating. So we wanted to do this just to have you all think about getting started, because I think that's such a big stumbling block, but it really doesn't have to be. It's as simple as asking some of these questions. And Abby, can you, do you want to open that resource page now to show? There's so many like questions and tools and things, but it's really just engaging them in this conversation about what are the issues that we're facing in our community and how do we want to solve them. And we're in a great place virtually right now because we can bring stakeholders into the classroom in really cool ways in this virtual space. We can bring in, the local floodplain managers and our FEMA emergency managers and just our local people involved in these issues, maybe decision makers, or maybe the decision maker is just the principal of the school. Maybe it's, it doesn't have to be at a community level, but I find that actually in these virtual times when we're all in kind of different physical spaces, that thinking about issues at a community scale is actually helpful, because we are all in that community where my community, where you all are, well, you all are across probably Illinois, but if we were all at a school normally, we would have that school as our shared community. But when we're virtual, we're in all different parts of our neighborhoods and places. So it's a good, my dog's gonna start barking. I'm gonna hand it over to Abby now.
Yeah, so we are on the EEI website, and under the training and events, there's been a lot of new things happening on this website lately, if you haven't noticed. But down here is the Rise Challenge Illinois. So that's where I'm at right now, is just the main Rise page that has kind of just all the background information, just lots of different information on here. But then at the very top, you'll see Rise Educator Resources. So this is the page that really has a ton of good stuff for anybody that is thinking that they want to lead a team. So the first section right here is all of the challenge documents. So the interest form that I mentioned before is linked right there. You just go in and fill that out. And then we have your proposal guide right here. So that'll walk you through exactly how to put together the proposal, the project proposal with your team or your students. The student proposal checklist is right there. And then those 2 judging rubrics that I mentioned are also included there. We have the timeline, so you can see kind of exactly how the project is supposed to go over the course of a year. And then down here this is the space where it is like a natural hazard brain dump is what's happening. And so it might seem a little bit overwhelming, but it's really, really fun. There's a lot of great information and resources that you can use with your students. And I've tried to lay it out in kind of a logical pattern, at least just logical to me. So we started with definitions. FEMA, the folks at FEMA Region 5 put together like, okay, what are all these terms that we're throwing around, and what do they mean when it comes to natural hazards and natural disasters in our communities? So that's a really good place to start, just to make sure, like anything else, you want to make sure that the folks that you're talking with understand your language, the lingo, and you have kind of that baseline knowledge. Then it jumps into the preparedness. So are we prepared should a hazard or a disaster event actually happen? And there's a lot of great resources, those questions, that question flyer that we were looking at before is right there for you. And then lots of different resources, games and activities that you can do related to preparedness with your students. Then hazard mitigation. So, okay, how can we make sure, how can we lower the risk of, the impact of a disaster should it happen? So again, we've got a really nice flyer with questions that you can talk to your students about investigating hazard mitigation, and then a multi-hazard risk by county. So again, how high is your risk level for different hazards? And then down here, because flooding is one of the major hazards that we face here in Illinois, we're starting to include a lot more kind of flooding specific information, Illinois specific information. Then there's FEMA flood facts. And then down here is the webinar that Alyssa mentioned. There's where it's other Colorado teachers that have participated in RISE before, kind of talking about their experiences, some of their stumbling blocks, some of the things that they did and how they did it in a virtual setting, which is a really great webinar. I found it very informational and really good to hear from other folks that had participated in the challenge before. This section of the website, I feel like, is changing on almost a daily basis. So if you don't see something you want, let me know and I will find it and put it up there. You can stop back, as often as you want, and something new will undoubtedly be there because FEMA is constantly sending me, oh, hey, did you see this tool? Or the folks from Montana or Colorado sharing different resources out. So the program is still growing, right? This is our pilot year. It's the first time we've launched this program. And so we're kind of developing the program while we're in it, which leads to a very kind of work in progress sort of website, I'll say.
It's great though. Thank you.
Yes. So yeah, lots of good stuff here. And again, all those documents and things that you need to get moving on your proposals are right up here at the top.
And I just wanted to address Megan's question about equity. So they're in those, okay, so yes. What's so interesting about, not so interesting, so unfortunate is that, oftentimes what we know is that folks that are already facing so many other challenges in our community that are low income are often in these areas that are more prone to natural hazards, right? So particularly here, for example, there was a group of students in Colorado last year that identified a mobile home park that's in a floodplain. And that is obviously a major issue. And so there are a lot of ways that we can approach natural hazard issues by just asking the people questions. So if you look back at that list of questions, if we're asking who is impacted by these issues the most, I think then it just goes naturally in an equity sort of state, like why are these communities more affected? And there is a really cool document that FEMA put together that kind of looks at equity in natural hazards that I will, Abby and I can post up on that website too. But I think that yes, the direction of natural hazards or social justice and equity would be a really good topic of conversation if an educator is comfortable going in that direction with natural hazards. I think they're very well aligned and you could certainly address that.
So right now we are a bit limited on that topic because our current administration signed an executive order not allowing federal contractors to discuss or provide any training or resources on certain flagged words. So because we are working as a subcontractor for FEMA as a nonprofit EEI right now, for a very short amount of time, hopefully, is very limited in what we can do as far as training and providing information. So that has FEMA kind of a little bit more hesitant to really jump in on those issues. Alyssa and I are really hoping that in just a short amount of time, some of those issues will be gone and we'll be able to push the envelope on those conversations and resources that we provide.
It doesn't mean that you as educators can't take those on in this space. So yeah, I know we have just 3 more minutes. Are there other pressing questions? Anything anybody wants to ask?
Kathleen had a question I wanted to make sure we got to.
So I'm on the conference committee for science in the South, and unfortunately we've moved our virtual conference from January to either March or April because teachers are still in such a flux. For them to even think about going to conference right now is really difficult. So I'm going to ask Megan and Abby if they'd be willing to do a presentation virtually on Earth Force and RISE for this conference.
I'm sure we can definitely do that for you, Kathleen.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that because I'd like to get the word out, and you know, even though you're on a time limit right now, this would be for 2022, but just to get any teachers where they have the peace of mind right now to even think about doing any project is really difficult. So
yeah. I will say too, though, that we've had a lot of educators that are looking for ways to engage young people right now. And this could be a way, like we have seen folks that have said, this has been really helpful. We needed some kind of like a structured thing that we're all working towards. So while it can be a lot to take on something new, natural hazards or science are in most curriculum, so it's something that a lot of teachers are having to teach anyway. And if you can engage students through a kind of contest-based studying and have them researching local issues that are meaningful to them, that could be like a really good direction for a very difficult time.
thank you.
Awesome, everybody. Well, if there's no more questions, thank you so much again for being here and listening. Again, EEI is so excited to be launching this new program, to be taking this on. I think environmental action, kind of getting to that final step of becoming environmentally literate, is one of the hardest things as educators to really do. You know, we're so good at the knowledge and the awareness and the appreciation and all those early steps, but really getting our students to understand that they can, in fact, make a difference, that they can really impact their communities is so important, so valuable. And I really hope that this program helps us to do that, to help us really build the confidence in the next generation that they can tackle environmental issues within their community. So thank you for being with us on this journey, and hopefully you will jump in full force and start up a team and get going with Rise Challenge. And we are here to help. Anything you need, just reach out. Do not hesitate to contact myself or Alyssa. And I will put my email, all our information is on the website, but I will throw my email in the chat box, and you can reach out at any time. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening and happy holidays.
Thank you all so much. Take good care. Bye.
Bye.
You want to stop recording?